Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the EcoHitch Trailer Hitch receiver on a 2025 Kia Carnival Hybrid. Adding a trailer hitch receiver to your Kia Carnival is a great option to really open up the real estate available on your vehicle. So whether you're pulling a trailer for work or for fun, or just adding a bike rack or cargo carrier, a trailer hitch receiver is a great way to do it. And originally this had a factory hitch installed, and it was quite unsightly. It was a completely exposed cross tube. It hung down quite a bit, and so our neighbor opted for the EcoHitch, which is going to bolt up to your bumper beam and give you a much cleaner look. So when it's installed, you'll see that there is no crossbar that's visible, just the receiver, and that's going to give you a nice clean OEM look, but all the usability of your hitch. Looking a little bit closer, this is a 2" by 2" receiver tube opening, which is going to be great. It's the standard size for a lot of different accessories, so if you are choosing a ball mount, bike rack, or cargo carrier, you're going to have tons of options when it comes to choosing those. And all of your accessories are going to stay in place with a 5/8 pin and clip. Now keep in mind, this does not come with the hitch. A lot of times when you pick up accessories, they'll have them included. If you plan on leaving your accessories on the back of your Carnival, you might want to take a look at a locking pin and clip. It becomes a good deterrent for anyone just walking by. They won't be able to just take out your pin and clip and walk away with your accessories. Plate style safety chain loops are a nice oblong shape, makes it nice and easy. It's also a clean look, but our standard S hook goes on there with no problem. Even a larger clevis style is going to work well. And speaking of pulling trailers, you're going to want to adhere to the weight capacities of your hitch as well as the vehicle's weight capacity. So check the vehicle's owner's manual, see what it's capable of towing, and then compare it with the numbers on the hitch as well as the accessories you'll be using to hook up to your trailer. Our torque lift EcoHitch comes in pretty solid. This is a heavy duty hitch, and you get a gross trailer weight rating of 4,500 pounds. That's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. So pretty heavy duty, but again, check the vehicle's owner's manual and make sure it's okay with the vehicle. As far as your tongue weight rating, that's going to be the downward pressure on the inside of the receiver tube opening, and that really accounts for a lot of your suspended accessories. So cargo carriers and bike racks, this one's going to be rated at 450 pounds, and that's pretty heavy duty. So a 4-bike rack loaded up or a cargo carrier on vacation shouldn't be an issue for your Carnival. A few quick measurements from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point of our fascia. It's about 2.5 inches, and that's going to be important when choosing folding accessories. Cargo carriers and bike racks can sometimes be stored in a vertical position. I don't worry that you're going to have any issues with those making contact with a vehicle, so you definitely can store those in a vertical. Just keep in mind, you're probably going to have to fold those down to open up your rear hatch. Now, if you're planning on pulling a trailer, you want to make sure that your trailer is going to be level going down the road. So to determine a rise or drop necessary from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, we're coming in at 14 inches. So if you have your trailer available, you can get that nice and level, measure from the ground to the top of the coupler, and then compare that with our measurement and determine the rise or drop necessary to get everything level. Now this is a great option. If you're looking at it, I think it's the cleanest look as far as hitches for Carnivals. It sits up a little bit higher than some of the other ones out there, so definitely a great option. But the drawback is going to be the fact that the fascia is going to be coming off, and the installation is just not as simple as some of the others, which are raise up, put bolts in, tighten, and torque. This one is going to be a little bit more difficult. It's got a few different brackets that get a little bit unique, and it's got some new body mounts that we put in place, which is something I've never done, but overall, none of it's terribly hard to do. So if you're a DIYer, follow along. I'll give you some tips and tricks to make sure you get your hitch installed. But if you watch the video and decide that maybe it's not for you, you don't have the time, place, tools, want any of it to get the hitch installed yourself, you can reach out to our dealers that are close to you by using our dealer locator. That way you can still get the hitch installed and not have to worry about the install. I think it's totally worth it because having that hitch is really just going to make your Carnival that much more usable. And if you do the install yourself or have it installed, either way, once you have that finished product installed, show us how you're using it on your Carnival. We'd love to see how neighbors are using our products out in the wild. It'll give other neighbors like you a chance to see what they can do with their Carnival. Speaking of the installation, let's take a look at that now. Now we'll begin our installation underneath, and we're going to be removing some panels, and that way we have access to get our fascia off and eventually our hitch in place. Now ours originally had a factory hitch on it, and it hung down quite a bit. It was pretty unsightly. So some of the steps in the beginning as far as removing panels may be different. Ours might have been trimmed for that hitch. So just take that into account when doing this, but the rest of it should be pretty much the same. So the first thing we'll do with a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver is going to be removing the plastic clips along the bottom side, as well as the panel that we have here. And as I mentioned, we might have had one on this side, but I don't see it. Regardless, we have plastic push pins on this end too. So we have a total of 3 on this side. We have 4 along the bottom. And then our plastic panel here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's also one that's tucked back there. So we'll go through and get those all popped out. And to get these off, pretty simple. There's going to be slots on 4 sides of these. So with a trim panel tool or a flathead, just pop that center and you should be able to remove these. I recommend having a nice organized spot to keep all of your hardware. It'll make reinstallation a lot easier. So again, ours is trimmed. You may have one that's located here, but we have one that's here. And then on the back side, as this curves up on the frame rail, they'll have one up here as well. And with those removed, we can take our panel and set it aside. Now you're going to head to the wheel wells, and there's going to be 4 Phillips head screws along the wheel well trim and this wheel well liner that we're going to be removing. And it's pretty tight here against the tire, so you could probably get away with a stubby Phillips. I have a 1/4 inch ratchet with just a Phillips head bit in here, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to get in here. But we'll get all 4 of them removed, and then we'll just repeat on the other side. Now the fascia has attachment points that are underneath the taillight, so we are going to need to remove those, and they're fairly easy to do. On this cap, you'll see that there's 2 caps with a little indent, so we'll just pry this open. And that's going to give us access to a 10mm bolt on both of these. So we'll get that loosened up and removed. And then the taillight has alignment pins, and it can get a little bit tricky to pop these out because they've probably never been removed, so they're in place pretty good. So what I recommend doing is just kind of grab hold and pull it back with you and just kind of wiggle it back and forth. And if it gets really tight, what you can do is with a plastic trim tool, something that's not going to scratch your paint, you can use this as a wedge, and that's going to kind of keep that pressure. And as we wiggle it back and forth, we should be able to get those to pop out. But just make sure you're going straight back. And be careful not to put too much pressure on the edge of your taillight. You can crack them in the process here. So just take your time here. There we go. So those alignment pins, you'll find that we have one here, and then there's one up top here as well. So if you need to pry, you can kind of look and see where those are, but you'll just have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit until you get that to pop out. And then we'll separate our taillight. There's just going to be a tab on our connector. Push that in. And then we can set our taillight aside. Now we can repeat on the other side. With the taillight out, we're going to be attacking the 2 10mm bolts that we have here, as well as the plastic push pin here on the bottom. At this point, we can begin to remove our fascia, and you might notice the painter's tape. I put this along the edge of the rear fascia and the rear quarter panel, and that way, as it's rubbing against each other as you're fighting it on and off, this will help protect scratches or chips from occurring. Now to get the fascia off, you're just going to pull back where that wheel well liner, and we remove those screws. You can get your hand behind here, and there's just going to be a series of clips, and you're just going to kind of work your way down, keeping pressure just at the small gap. And these clips can get a little bit tricky and tight, so just take your time here. And we're going to work all the way up. And then this plastic portion is kind of interesting. It's got clips up top, so we're going to just try to peel this back a little bit here. Kind of work here as well, kind of moving it back and forth. And the plastic's rather brittle on this piece here, so just kind of take your time. There's clips back here, so I'm going to just kind of work this out. And the trick is to, as you're working on one side, have someone else be working on the other side. Get to the point where you can start removing it at the middle. And having that extra person is really going to make a big difference because there may be electrical connections, and it's nice to have someone be able to hold the fascia as you separate those, and it's really cumbersome too as you're removing it, so it'll make it a little bit safer, not damaging your fascia in the process. There we go. And once I was able to pop that off, we can start to pull this back and see if we have electrical connections. And as we head over to the driver's side, we're going to find that we do have one that's located. It's going to go right here, but this whole thing kind of connects to the bumper. So we're going to go to this main harness and get this separated. Now it's a little bit tight here, but we should be able to pull this gray plastic clip. Once we have this off, I'll show you, but once you get that popped, you should be able to pull this back and that'll push the clip out. And there's also one that's located a little bit further back, so again, you can see why it's important to have that extra person holding the fascia up. And this one, you just push on that top, and then from here, we can set our fascia aside. We're going to remove our rear bumper beam, or cross member as they call it. There's just going to be 2 bolts that we're going to tackle on each side, and they're going to be a 14mm socket to get this accomplished. Once you have that hardware removed, we can pull this out. There is an alignment pin that just kind of keeps that in place, and we're going to set this aside. It's not going to be reinstalled, so you can hold on to it if you'd like. Now on the side, on our passenger side by the exhaust, we're going to have this plate, and it's going to be 2 10mm bolts, so we'll get this taken down. And then from here, you'll have easy access to the exhaust hanger isolator. Now mine's already off because I had to take the factory hitch off, which was located here, but you're going to just pry on this. You can use a little bit of silicone or soapy water to get this to pop off. You can pry off bottom or top, but the top one's going to be a little bit easier. So just use a pry bar or a long flathead to just kind of wedge that and get this to pop off. Now we're getting ready to get our hitch kind of at least raised in place, and we're going to put 2 bolts. So we have our zinc coated bolts with a split washer and a flat washer. I have one on each side, and we're going to be attaching it to this hole. So I'm going to get one side started here. It's a pretty heavy duty hitch, so just get a few threads on each, and that'll support it, making it easier to get the other side up. Now this hitch is going to have a secondary bracket that goes on the back side and bolts up to the frame, and this is going to, give us a nice solid mount on our hitch, but there's also a spacer that goes in between our bracket and the metal on the body before getting bolted down to the frame. So your spacer is going to look like this. And you'll see this square portion, that's going to go where we're eventually going to have threads pass through. And this hole should pretty well align with the hole that's in the vehicle. Now, the issue is on this back end, you can see the caulking from the factory. That sealant is going to cause a little bit of issues to where this isn't going to sit as flush as we'd like. So with you can use a putty knife or a utility knife. I'm just going to trim some of this back and make sure that we have clearance for this to sit nice and proper. Now, you're not going to get a perfect fit on this. It is going to sit at a slight just kind of angle here just because we want that hole to align. That's going to be the most important. And there is a metal lip here, so it may end up kind of sitting like this, but either way it's going to be flush once we tighten it. So what we'll do is get our side-specific bracket. These holes on the long edges, they're going to go into the frame in the closest threaded holes, and then this should line up, so just make sure you have that hole lined up here. And as far as the bolts that go up into the frame rail, we'll be using these ones. We have a split washer and a flat washer, and we're just going to get these hand tightened in place. And these are slotted, so they're going to give you that adjustability to be able to get that bracket, the spacer in place. So I'm going to just hand tighten this down to get it snug-ish, but still make it to where it's movable. And then I can slide this back, and you'll see this little cornered edge here should align fairly decent. Again, it's not going to be perfect here. And then we can move that bracket forward and then snug these down a little bit more. And that weld nut on the back side should keep this all in place. We'll go ahead and repeat on the other side as well. Now we're going to grab our more fine threaded bolts, a little smaller diameter. They're going to be the same ones that we threaded into that top hole, and we're going to put those into the bottom here. So we'll get these just hand tightened in place for now as well. Now we've threaded in this bolt, and eventually we're going to put a serrated flange nut on the back side to just sandwich it all together, but we don't have enough threads to do that quite yet. So what we're going to do is get our large shoulder bolt in, and then once we tighten that, it'll draw it in, and that's going to allow us to get that serrated flange nut in place. So the holes may not be perfectly aligned, and that's okay. We can just use a screwdriver to kind of, get this all aligned as much as we can, and then with our long shoulder bolt, split washer, flat washer combo, we'll pass this in, and you may be able to thread this in, but we should be able to get this to pass all the way through. That's why we also leave the hitch loose, so we can push up on this if we need to. So it might take a little finagling here, but we should be able to get this to pass in. And if it's fighting you on the threads, don't mangle up the threads. What you can do is put a floor jack or something underneath the hitch and just raise this up enough to get those clearance for all of it to pass through. I was able to get it to thread through, and then I finished it up with a flat washer, split washer nut. Now, don't be surprised if it's not completely perfectly aligned. Neither of the sides were. So the main thing is you get it passed through your spacer as well as our bracket that we have on each side of the frame. Now with all of our hardware in place, we can start to snug things down. We're going to come back later with a torque wrench, so you really don't need to crank them down. We just want everything snug and kind of in place. And it's also going to give us a chance to snug down this bolt and get that serrated flange nut on the back end. Now when it comes to tightening and torquing, I do recommend going on the vertical ones that go into the frame first, and then we'll work with our larger bolt and then finally back to our threaded ones. So I'll just go through and get these all snugged down. The bolts on the frame are going to be a 3/4 inch socket to accomplish that. Now once you have the hardware all tightened down, we're going to go back with that torque wrench and follow the instruction manual. It'll have the torque setting laid out for each of the different types of hardware. So make sure you're adjusting your torque wrench according. And if you don't have a torque wrench, we have them here available at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. But this is going to be an important step because it's going to make sure that long term you can safely tow down the road and it's not going to be loose. But also when it comes to weld nuts, you can over tighten and damage. So this is going to make sure that we get it properly torqued exactly where we want it to go. So following that same procedure that we did before, we'll get it torqued down. And remember too, once we get this inside bolt that's threaded, you can go ahead and take that serrated flange nut and we'll put that on the back end and snug that down too. So again, make sure that you get that serrated flange nut on the back of this bolt. And at this point, we can get our exhaust isolator put back in place. And we're going to be doing a little bit of trimming on our fascia to clear the bumper. So let's get that with some painter's tape and we'll get that trimmed out. And to trim this out, I use painter's tape just to give me a nice guide. It keeps it, to where you're going to get a straight line. And to find the center point, you can use the holes where the plastic push pins were originally. Find that center point, and the measurements in the instructions are going to get you pretty close. So I'm going to be using an oscillating tool. This works really well to get a nice clean line. Whatever you have available to cut, go ahead, get this trimmed out. We can always cut off more if we need to. But take your time and we'll come back with a file, get some of those burrs knocked down. So I trimmed out our fascia, and before we get it mounted up, we need to get our body mounts in place. And these are going to become the new mounting points for our lower fascia with those plastic push pins or new hardware as it goes through. And what we're going to do is put our carriage bolt through each of these slots. And then we have a longer bracket and a shorter bracket. The longer bracket is going to go on the outside. So you can feed that on. And then we have a nylon lock nut. We're just going to thread that on for now. And then our shorter one will go on the inside. and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Now with our hardware loosely in place, we do want to have it at least a little snugged up, so that way it's going to hold in place, but we may need to adjust side to side for it to bolt up to our lower fascia. So I am going to snug these down, but just make it to the point again where it's going to hold in place, but you can still slide this side to side. We're going to get our exhaust shield that we removed previous back in place before we hold our fascia up and get that mounted. So just make sure you get this all tightened down. And as you put your fascia in place, you're also going to want to make sure that those harnesses that we unplugged, that we're putting those back in. And from there, really everything's just going to be the reverse order, so you can get your taillights in place and everything else. So just follow those steps. And then when we get that all put together, we'll come back and I'll show you how to mount these up on the bottom of the fascia. Now at this point, with our fascia all pretty well put back together, this lower bracket should be pretty close to lining up the holes. Again, that's why we leave it loose, so you can kind of adjust that. And you can still gain a little bit of access to those nuts through the gap, so we can tighten those down a little bit later, but we're going to attach using our button head screws, a split washer and a flat washer. And when we pass this through our bracket, we're going to finish it up with a flat washer, a split washer, and a nut. So we're going to do that for all 4 of them. So we'll go through and get these in place. And that was a look at installation of the EcoHitch Trailer Hitch receiver on a 2025 Kia Carnival Hybrid.